Welcome and great to have you join us as we go off script with Sam Monk, Senior Leader of Equippers Church. Enjoy today's podcast.
Well, welcome along to episode 15 of Off Script with Sam Monk. We're talking about what's worked, what hasn't, and leadership lessons. Good to be back here, Sam.
Come on.
And I guess today I want to jump in, start the conversation off just talking about, leadership rewards. For anyone that's pursuing God or pursuing leadership, you quickly learn that there's costs to this thing. Jesus is even quite clear that there's cost. But I guess that leads to the question, well, what's the payoff to it all? What's the reward of this whole thing?
Yeah, well, I think the reward is the harvest. If a seed dies, if it doesn't die, it remains alone. But if it dies, it produces a whole lot. And I think the reward of ministry is, the changed lives, the individuals, but also knowing that God knows intimately the desires of your heart. And I like what the psalmist says, where he says, delight in the Lord and he will give you the desires of your heart. And he knows your desires better than you do. And I think you can trust him with those desires. And there's a reward from serving God. The reason why we're in this is not for nothing. But it's defining what that reward is, because it's a little bit different to how the world defines rewards.
Yeah, big time. And I guess what you're seeking from out of the world and get from there is quite selfish. But the rewards, from God are quite different. And I guess even in your journey and how you've seen it is how that shift from a kind of a worldly reward system to a kingdom reward system. How do you even navigate that as a leader?
Yeah, well, big thing is, in the world they want fame, success, material possessions, that's a reward. But I like the parable of the talents, because it's interesting when people speak on the parable of the talents, often they speak about the dude who buried his talent in the ground. And, there's a whole message on that. But I found, I was reading that and I was caught by the reward of the guy with the 5 who invested and got 5 more, and the guy with the 2 who invested his 2 and got 2 more. And in the New Living it says, well done, good and faithful servant, the words that you want to hear. Well done, good and faithful servant. Here is more responsibility. Let's celebrate together. And so the reward of being good and faithful in this situation of the guys who invested their talents, grew their talents, was more responsibility. And I found myself asking the question, man, in a lot of places, first of all, we see responsibility as a burden, not a reward. And so the question I asked myself was, how do I renew my mind so that I can see responsibility as a blessing, not a burden? Because a lot of us, let's face it, it's like more responsibility. Man, I'm trying to get rid of responsibility in a lot of places. But in the kingdom, the reward for doing well is actually more responsibility.
And I guess, like you're saying, for a lot of people, that's not the natural response to responsibility. Is to, yes, awesome, more. But I guess you want to unpack, how do you develop an appetite for that?
An appetite for responsibility. Well, when you say, here's your reward, more responsibility, it's like saying, here's the reward for eating your vegetables. It's not dessert, it's more vegetables. And I think you just got to settle in your life that everything in your life requires maintenance. And, so often we buy into an image of success that's not accurate. Or not true. Those things that we think are going to satisfy us are probably not going to satisfy us. And I've got this stone garden, but even my stone garden needs weeding. And I think we buy into an illusion sometimes that this reward is going to satisfy us, but where it's actually the adventure God calls us to, that's the thing that's going to satisfy the longing of our hearts. It's not the new car. It's amazing how a new car becomes an old car very quickly. It's not the house, it's not the holidays, it's not all these other things, that in the end, really in the light of eternity, are meaningless.
Yeah.
It's not those things. And I just think, really having that, looking at things from an eternal perspective is really important.
Yeah, totally. And one of the questions you've often asked us as a team at different times is that question of who do you want your reward to come from?
Yeah.
Who do you want your reward to come from? And that's a big question. Do you want to, I guess, for the listeners, unpack what you mean when you ask us that question?
Yeah, well, I like that Sermon on the Mount when Jesus talks about fasting and praying.
Yeah.
He says, go, shut the door, do it in private. And he talks about people who do it in public. He says, you have your reward. But if you do it in private, in the secret place, it says God will reward you openly.
Yeah.
And, there's a hidden power that's discovered only in the secret place in our lives. And it's whatever you do in secret, whatever you do for the audience of one. I know a lot of sports people write AO1 on their armband. Whatever you do for the audience of one, in the end, God is your rewarder. And I like to think of it this way. It's like when I go shopping, or when my girls go shopping, should I say. When my girls go shopping, they don't go shopping through the eyes of their own resources. Mm-hmm. They shop according to what's in my bank account, unfortunately. And because I have more than what they have. Yeah. And when I think about a reward is, I could get my reward from you. I don't know how much money is in your bank account. We won't disclose that publicly right now.
Not quite the podcast for that one. But.
I could get my reward from God, who is unlimited.
Yeah.
It's like, who do you want your friend? Which one of your friends do you want to buy the present for you? Yeah. It's the one who's got more resources.
Yeah.
And who loves you more as well, who knows you better.
Yeah. And I guess you also just want to unpack, that's the whole thing of God has this ability to reward us.
Yeah.
But in many cases, we can get caught trying to chase that reward.
Yeah.
Instead of actually, if we pursue the mission and we pursue the things of God, He provides the reward. Do you want to just talk about that difference between God provides a reward versus us chasing after the rewards?
Yeah. Well, so often we make an idol out of the reward.
Yeah.
We've got to chase God. We've got to seek God out, like Matthew 6:33. Seek first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you.
Yeah.
And a lot of people today, can seek out travel, can seek to buy houses and different things, but housing, clothing, shelter, different things, they are a byproduct. God says, I'll look after those things. I've got those sorted if you seek me first. And I've found when you chase God, the things that other people chase find you.
Yeah.
And I found that in my life, whether it be owning our house or whether it be travel. Kathy and I have never sought those things, but in seeking God, it's almost like God's opened the door and say, hey, I can trust you with this house because I know you're not going to serve the house. The house is there to serve you. A lot of people, chase travel and chase an adventure, but in seeking God, I've found, that adventure, the greatest adventure you could ever live, finds you. And, that's the blessing of following God. There's huge benefits from serving Jesus.
Yeah.
If you lay down anything, Mark chapter 10, if you leave houses, brothers, sisters, for my sake in the Gospels, He said, now in this time, you'll get 100-fold with persecution, but your 100-fold harvest is the promise now in this time.
Yeah, great. And, I've heard you use it before and share about before, just even how in your younger years you chose to take responsibility on in leading the church, which meant giving up the ability to travel and doing OE and a lot of those things a lot of people chase in the younger years, but now you got more travel than you want.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's funny how that works. But my encouragement to, anybody starting out in leadership is when it comes to responsibility, don't shun it.
Yeah.
Say yes. Take it on.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you say, some people may say, I can't, I've got too much on your plate. There's always a way of doing something.
Yeah.
I get encouraged, and I look at people who carry more responsibility than me, and I think, how do they do it? because, a lot of them, they're carrying more responsibility. They've got a great marriage. Their kids are flourishing. And I'm going, if they can do it, I can do it.
Yeah.
But so often we dismiss it because we think, we've got too much on our plate. But there's a way of doing it. We've all got the same hours in a day.
Yeah.
We've all got that. So maybe we've got to look at it differently.
Yeah.
But a lot of people dismiss it and no, I don't want that.
Yeah.
It's like we've actually got to get our appetite for vegetables, because if we eat our vegetables, we get more vegetables. And growing that appetite is really important, because that's how we see change in the world. And I think I said on one podcast, you're growing in maturity when you can take responsibility for something that's not your fault.
Yeah, well. And I guess I don't know if you have any thoughts around this, but just in your journey, you've obviously been on a big part of raising up a whole lot of younger leaders coming through.
Yep.
And there's leaders that jump at responsibility and leaders that are shy from it. I guess what are some of the things that you've found that are causing people to, I guess, have that shyness towards responsibility? What are some of those blockers or filters that we might carry around responsibility that people need to...
Yeah,
I guess.
Well, I think a lot of people don't realize with every blessing comes responsibility. And kids are a blessing from God, but they don't feel like it at 2 a.m. in the morning. Getting a car, owning a car is a great blessing. Yeah. I remember my first car, Morris Minor 1000, top speed at 80 Ks. had the engine of a sewing machine, and like a sewing machine. And it was like, great blessing, but you get that car, breaks down, needs gas. There's a responsibility that comes with it. And a lot of people, don't see how the blessing outweighs the responsibility. Yeah. And in God's economy, I believe the blessing outstrips massively the responsibility.
Yeah.
And because people don't see that, they don't often go, I don't know if I want to take on that responsibility. That's too much. But knowing that you're changing people's lives, having an effect on people's lives and their eternity. Yeah. If you don't view it from an eternal perspective, you'll always pull back.
Yeah. And even on that whole thing, I've heard you kind of talk about it before. If you want to dive a bit more into it, but the whole difference between we all pray for provision. But responsibility is actually when you step into that, okay, now I'm a provider. So I'm not just praying for provision, I'm praying I can become a provider. Do you want to just talk through that whole dynamic?
Well, the big words from Jesus where he said it's more blessed to give than it is to receive.
Yeah.
A lot of us go, I'm blessed if I get an answer. Yeah. I'm blessed somebody bought me a car. I'm blessed because, this happened. And in fact, you hear a lot of testimonies in church about, I got blessed because I got a pay rise.
Yeah.
I got blessed. That's good. That is a testimony of God's provision. God provided for the Israelites in the wilderness. Yeah. Their shoes never wore out, clothes never wore out, food outside their tent, awesome. But in the promised land, they went from needing provision to actually becoming a provider. Yeah. And I think promised land living is when we go from looking for an answer to becoming the answer.
Wow.
And so often we're in a place where we're looking for an answer rather than I can actually be the answer to somebody else's problem.
Yeah, great.
And that to me is living in the promised land, because it's more blessed to give than it is to receive.
Yeah.
And receiving is a blessing, but if you want to go to a greater level of blessing, it's when you graduate and you become a giver, not just a receiver.
Yeah, and that's a big challenge for all of us, I guess, out there, is to not just believe for provision, but pray we can become a provider. And I hope this episode of Off Script with Sam Monk has blessed you. Why don't you take a moment to like and share it with people in your world? Otherwise, we'll join you back here for another episode of Off Script with Sam Monk.
Thanks for listening to Off Script with Sam Monk. If you found this podcast helpful, make sure you pass it on. We love your feedback, so drop us a line about what topics you'd like to hear about on Off Script with Sam Monk.